Okay guys, today we're going to talk about prevention, also known as prophylaxis, but I like the simpler word prevention. So let's say after d4, what is white threatening? Well, he wants to play e4 next and get a big center, and prevention is all about moves which prevent the opponent's threats or IDs. So there are several ways to prevent this. You can play d5, putting a pawn here and indirect or directly preventing e4. You could maybe try to think about b6, putting a bishop on b7 and indirectly defending against e4, although it's a little slow, so it doesn't really prevent e4 at the moment. And what I did in the game, so this is a blitz game I'm showing you, is knight f6, a flexible move which controls the center and also prevents e4 for the time being. So with knight c3, white is renewing the idea of e4. The knights now support the e4 push, so e4 now becomes possible. That's why in this position I played d5. And here I was expecting maybe bishop g5 or bishop f4. So bishop g5 is the Verasov, bishop f4 is the Rapport-Jobava system, or Jobava London as it's called. But my opponent played the surprising f3 move. So here he again is reinforcing the idea of playing e4. The knight supports it, the pawn supports it. Only the downside is that now with the pawn that has moved, this diagonal here, I'm sorry for these arrows, this diagonal here has become a little weak. So here an example of indirectly fighting against e4 would be to play c5, so that when white pushes e4 there is pressure on the d4 pawn. In the blitz game I decided to go e6, not overcomplicating things, and white went here bishop g5, pinning the knight to the queen. So here I went h6, and the big idea is to make the bishop commit to a square, so that being black I know if it's going to stay on this diagonal or if it's going to drop back to this diagonal. The opponents will usually try to maintain the pin, and here I prevented it. So what was it I wanted to prevent? I wanted to prevent e4, e5. So when e4 comes, then perhaps e5 might be annoying, exploiting the pin. Although in this case, since I have already played h6, I could play the in-between move g5. But here I played bishop e7, keeping things very simple. And after e4, d takes, e takes. Here in this position I played knight c6. So I actually missed the tactic knight takes e4 here, making use of this unprotected bishop. And in case of bishop takes e7, this attacks the queen at the same time. So after all of these moves, black just has a better position. So let's go back to the game. So instead of knight takes e4, I played here knight c6, and I suppose white could have played e5 here. Yeah. Instead he chose bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and here queen g4. And here is an important moment. When you're dealing with prevention or prophylaxis, you always want to ask yourself the question, what does my opponent want to do? What's his plan? What's his most annoying move? So what he probably wants to do is long castle. So we can take the pawn with 3 pieces, but only one capture prevents him from his plan of long castle, which is queen takes d4. Which is a big clue that this is probably the strongest move. And if we put on the engine, indeed we can see that it is. And here white continued with rook to d1. And here I played queen to b4, utilizing the pressure on the c3 knight and pinning it. So after a3 attacking the queen, I took on c3, and after b takes a check and rook to d2. You can see, well, this pawn isn't hanging at the moment, but with castling we are giving some extra protection to the pawn and some extra security to our king. And here bishop d3, and again you can ask yourself, what does white want to do and what do we want to prevent? Well, white probably wants something like e5, queen e4, queen h7 mate, right? So that's the plan. And how can we prevent it? We can prevent it simply by e5. By e5. That's also a discovered attack on the queen, so we win a tempo. Instead I played knight to d4, and now white plays knight to e2, which is not the greatest move since, well, since we have such a great position, we don't mind exchanging some pieces. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. We're 2 pawns up, so we really don't mind to exchange some pieces. So also, so king to e2, and now I played e5, blocking in this bishop and driving the queen away. So queen to h5. And now I was thinking for a moment, and I noticed that this bishop is kind of short of squares, which is how I came up with the plan c5 to c4. And well, the game ended here. After this blunder, I could take the rook on f1. Why exactly is prevention or prophylaxis such a strong concept? Well, if we think about it, we are fixing problems before they are even there. And by doing that, we win time. So let's say e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. And let's say that now we are expecting knight f6. We can play something else, but then after knight f6, we will have to react. And by playing, for example, knight c3 first, it doesn't matter if black plays knight f6. We can play something else here. We don't need to respond, since we're already prevented black's plan, black's idea. Let's also look at this from black's side. So let's say we are playing these moves here, Roy Lopez, and let's say black plays a6 here to chase the bishop away. So black saying, well, you can give me the bishop pair, or you can move your bishop somewhere else. And if you take, actually, you might say, well, doesn't this lose a pawn? But here it's an indirect defense. So black can play d takes e6, and after knight takes e5, black has this tactic, queen d4, with a double attack on the knight and the pawn. Which is actually very good for black. So let's see here. So we'd have to go computer even slash g4, although I think most players would go f3. And here, well, this is just not a good position for white. So sometimes you can simply protect something directly as a form of prevention. Or in the case of the previous example, the Roy Lopez, you can prevent the opponent's idea by tactical means. That's all for today. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment or hit the bell button, and I will see you perhaps in one of the next videos.